and welcome. My name is David Ridgway and I welcome you to Kirklees Local Television's Weekly Wind-Up. This is where we bring you a digest of the weekly news. We aim to be informative, interesting, amusing and indeed provocative. We will be discussing 3 topics this week: child poverty, the tipping point and the new Kirklees policy for taxi drivers. To help us find out more about these matters, I'm delighted to introduce you to Joe Norris from Save the Children, Councillor Julie Stewart down the far end, who's a member of the Green Party, and Cath Walter, Head of Service for Licensing in Kirklees. But as always, we want feedback from you. The weekly wind-up can be contacted by email on info@kirkleeslocaltv.com and you can search on Twitter @weeklywindup. So Joe, let me start with you. Can you give us some background as to how the Save the Children charity works?
It started nearly 100 years ago by 2 sisters they saw the Russian famine and they actually gathered people in the Royal Albert Hall to raise money and awareness, and they actually there's a thing called the Rights of the Child, which they wrote. We now operate in nearly 120 countries around the world, and we help in emergencies, child poverty, education, health.
Well, let me ask, does the money you raise get transferred from one country to another if it's necessary?
No, each Save the Children is its own individual charity in that country. So we're Save the Children UK, and the money is used in the UK and also in projects around the world.
So how do you actually raise the money?
Well, we have, I look after the Yorkshire region, and we have the retail side of things, so we have 8 shops in Yorkshire, and that's 8 of 133 shops in the UK. We have branches where they have coffee mornings, do outside events, such as we're in North Allerton. They have a thing called a Nearly New sale that's been running for many, many years. So it's all of our shops are run by volunteers. We have no paid managers within the shop, so it enables Save the Children to contribute a bigger proportion than paying wages, and they're very well supported.
Now that means, of course, that the percentage of the money donated or the goods that are sold, a percentage will still be taken out of those funds for administrative purposes, but that percentage will presumably for Save the Children be extremely small if there's no wages to pay.
Yes, I think the best way to look at that is to say for every £1 raised, 88 pence of that £1 is spent directly on saving and making children's lives better.
So how do you get the goods into your shops?
A lot of other charities have stock collectors that run around in vans and collect up stock, which is obviously a cost. We don't operate anything like that. We just solely rely on the general public giving us the goods over the doorstep. And so the local shop in Huddersfield is in 25 Westgate, and we're more than happy to receive goods.
Do you actually buy any goods?
No,
to resell,
that is
for retail?
no. That's the other unique thing about Save the Children. But it's the size of the charity. We're classed as a medium-sized organisation for the shops. So that's unique that we're run solely by volunteers. Okay. And the other unique thing is we don't sell any new product. The only new product we do sell is Christmas cards.
Julie, do you think that the council should be doing more to help?
I would love the council to be able to do more to help, but they do an awful lot already. It's probably a lot of people don't probably recognise. There is lots of course, they manage the benefit service, and that's constantly changing. They're constantly having to adapt to grazing demands. They support a lot of voluntary organisations that are working on the front line, helping people in poverty. They've set up new crisis centres. They're supporting the growth of food banks. They're working with charities that are helping to run breakfast clubs. There is an awful lot that the council does more. I think in an ideal world, as a council, we'd love to do more because we can see there's a growing demand all the time. More and more people in poverty, more and more people in need for help. And of course, if families in poverty, that impacts on the children. If people are losing their jobs, they're struggling to make ends meet, the children are suffering. So we want to do as much as possible in an ideal world, but it's really challenging times.
1.6 million is a big number.
It's 1 in 4 children. It's shocking, absolutely shocking.
Really, in a modern country like Britain.
Yeah, we're supposed to be the seventh richest, aren't we?
Yes, and we're one of the worst with child poverty in the westernised world. Can I just say, sort of on your point about how we, supporting local services support with working with Save the Children. The projects that we run in the UK, there's one project called FAST, which is Families and Schools Together, and that's where parents and schools work together. The theory is if you capture and can enable a child by the age of 5, you then make their opportunities and in future life much, much better. So that's one where they go in and they work with the schools, and that's an 8-week programme, and that's been hugely successful, and it's growing.
Cath, let me ask, the cuts to central government grant become really severe over the next 2 years, and we're all having to work to come to terms with that. Do you think that voluntary action, the voluntary organisations will, like Save the Children, will be able to bridge the gap?
I'm not sure that they will be able to bridge that gap, and I'm not sure either that they should have to bridge that gap, because I think it's appalling that in the 21st century we've got 1.64 million children living in poverty in the UK, and I don't understand why that is.
Do you think, therefore, from what you just said, that we should be addressing this from the other end rather than trying to put an elastoplast over the situation to try and make it better? We should be actually addressing the cause of it all.
I think so, and from what I know, and I'm certainly no expert, but reading, this isn't just about children in families that are dependent on benefits. There's working families that have children in poverty. So we should be looking at wages, especially for the lower paid. If somebody has a living wage, then that would take those children straight away out of the poverty gap.
Yes.
Can I just echo something that's said earlier as well by Joe on the shops and the way the shops work and people donating goods? My advice to anybody in Kirklees would be to take any goods that you want to donate directly to the charity shop, whether it's Save the Children or a charity of your choice, because more and more charities are signing up to commercial collectors, and the commercial collectors only give a donation back to the charity. Right. And I know this because we license house-to-house collections in Kirklees, and the agreements that I see falling on my desk where they're paying £50 a tonne of clothes back to the charity, when at the moment recycling they're weighing in at £700-800 a tonne. So please take your goods directly to the shop.
Absolutely right. Yes, I would. I would say that to anybody. If you take it over the doorstep, you definitely know 100%. Even if your goods aren't good enough to sell, yes, they do get recycled, but the money goes directly. There's nothing taken out.
Thank you very much. We're going to take a break there. This is a really difficult subject, and thank you very much for bringing it open into us all today. I've learnt a lot. Before we take a break, after we've taken the break, we're going to look at the problems of climate change. We're going to resolve all that. We've resolved the question of poverty in children, then we'll resolve climate change, and then we'll resolve the problems with the taxi drivers. So there we are. But we want to hear from you. You can always contact us on info@kirkleeslocaltv.com and search for us on Twitter at Weekly Windup. Thank you. Welcome back. Julie, you're a member of the Green Party.
I am.
Each year you and your colleagues urge the council to introduce certain ideas within the budget to make Kirklees a more environmentally acceptable place. How does the tipping point declaration fit into your broader priorities, and indeed, can you firstly tell us what the declaration is?
The declaration, as I understand, it's been written by by a group called the Kirklees Campaign Against Climate Change. And it's 8 statements, these 8 simple statements they'd like everyone to sign up to, which is taken from evidence produced by the International Panel for Climate Change, the IPCC. This is a team of scientists that collate research from all over the world, analyse it and produce reports on every 5 to 7 years to monitor the developments in climate change. And they think these are 8 simple statements that if everybody signs up to could help us achieve greater carbon reduction to try and help manage a situation before it gets to a point where they've classed as a tipping point, which is a point of no return. This point when climate change gets even more severe and dramatic than it is now, with devastating impacts.
Well, our watchers and the general public are fed a regular diet of reports of unusual weather conditions.
Yes.
Are these reports really demonstrating that the Earth's average temperature is rising?
Yeah, well, I'm no scientist, but from what I've read, what I've been reading, this is very much related. I have some papers here which talks about how over the last 3 decades, the warming of the planet has been unprecedented. They haven't seen changes like this in the last 1800 years. So it is very dramatic, and it is very worrying for this country. We've got places like Somerset that were flooded dramatically last winter that are technically below the sea level, but the sea level's risen 1.19 centimetres in the last 5 years. So, and it's likely to rise again, and the predictions are the sea levels will rise another 2 centimetres.
But haven't the sea levels been rising and falling ever since the world's been there?
I'm not a scientist,
Okay.
so I couldn't tell you that, but all I can tell you is what I've read from the reports from the IPCC, and they say no, not the way it is now. And you've got 876 scientists from, I can't remember, I think it's something like 64 countries.
I understand that the Somerset levels flooded regularly every winter before they introduced, or we introduced a sensible drainage system, and that drainage system worked extremely well because the rivers into which the water was drained were kept dredged and kept free flowing, and the Rivers Authority hasn't done that for the last 15 to 20 years, and so it flooded, and everybody said, oh gosh, shock, horror, it's flooded. I mean, I know it's bad news for the people who live there, and if you want to go and live on a floodplain, well, of course, that's your choice. But nevertheless, do we not look to ourselves for the reason for this, or is it really climate change?
It is ourselves that are influencing the climate change. It is carbon emissions. There is things we could be doing to manage it, but it's how much money can we spend. It is costing, the World Bank says it's costing £1.2 trillion a year. Is significant amounts of money in climate change, but the prediction from the World Bank is that's going to increase.
I mean, I'm not a denier of climate change, but I do find that the manner in which we are fed the information tends to be a bit on the scary side rather than on the considered side. But this tipping point, the actual balance between where we are today and where that tipping point might be, I believe is only an extra 1 degree.
1 degree.
1 degree, on average, rise in temperature. It's not a lot.
The AR4 report was recommending that we try to manage carbon emissions to reduce the rise of the world temperature by up to 2 degrees, but this latest evidence in the 2013, the AR5 report, is saying 1 degree could have devastating impacts.
But surely then, if we're going to reduce carbon emissions, surely the answer to all of this is nuclear generation of power?
Could be right in the future. Nuclear power is not the way at the moment because the byproducts of nuclear power are not stable.
Not if it's fission.
But there is a lot of work going on to try and create clean, stable nuclear power. That would be nice, but that is quite futuristic. Here and now we need to do something now. We can't wait for scientists to evolve this wonderful technology. Climate change isn't something for tomorrow. It's not something for the next generations. It's here and now and impacting on lives now. And it's having a dramatic impact on child poverty worldwide, and it's always the poorest countries around the world and the poorest individuals around the world, in this country and globally, that are suffering the most from the changes in climate. And
but there are balances to this, because when I was young, no doubt when you were young too, you never got any British wines being made, but there's a growing industry because
in Home Firth,
Britain's a bit warmer. Yeah, Home Firth.
That's right.
That's right. although there used to be, in Roman times, grapes were grown much further north than Home Firth in this country. But that's another matter. Thank you very much for that. So, Cath, I want to come back to this last topic that we've got now, the introduction of the new policy for taxi drivers. Caused a bit of a stir, hasn't it?
Certainly has.
Is that my fault?
I think you can shoulder some of the blame for it, David.
Thank you very
yes.
much indeed. Okay, super. Why was it necessary to introduce this new controversial rule that if a taxi driver accumulates 9 penalty points on his driving licence or her driving licence, then that taxi badge is suspended until the driver can take the licensing driving test once again?
Firstly, I'd like to say the policy is much wider than just that little one clause
Indeed.
about penalty points. But in relation to that, taxi drivers are carrying around the fare-paying public. They pay for a service and they need to have confidence in the person that is driving them round, that they are a safe driver and that they don't run round like idiots on the road, which I think anyone walking around Kirklees sometimes see taxi drivers driving in an unacceptable manner. By far, the most complaints that I deal with on a daily basis, or my staff deal with, are complaints from the public about driving standards of licensed taxi drivers in Kirklees. So the idea behind the policy is, if a driver's accumulated 9 penalty points on his DVLA licence, he's doing something wrong. And at that stage, we have to question whether he's safe to continue driving taxis. So the badge will be suspended until he takes a new extended DSA driving test. By extended, I mean it's a special test for taxi drivers. If they pass that, fine, they'll get their badge back. If they don't pass it, then they shouldn't be driving taxis in Kirklees.
In any event?
Yes.
Whether they got 9 points or none?
Yeah, and it has
Quite
caused
so.
controversy. If you look at Bradford Council, for example, at 9 points they revoked driver's badge.
Full stop, finish.
Yeah.
And did they have a lot of outcry when they introduced that?
It caused controversy to start with, but then settled down again, like any policy does when it's
Okay.
introduced.
Do you feel it is a fair statement to say that this is a policy which, if a driver has accumulated 9 penalty points, it gives that driver an opportunity to maintain his income, having passed the test, by getting back his badge? So therefore, really, in comparison to Bradford, it's quite a soft policy.
Yeah, you could say that.
Joe, do you feel that that gives you more confidence in the taxi drivers and the standard of their driving in this borough?
Yes, it does, because you'd be confident to get in that taxi then, wouldn't you? You wouldn't be thinking, well, am I safe? And you know then that the borough is taking care of those, the public and thinking of the public.
Can I just say that's one of the purposes behind it as well, is that if the risk of having badges suspended by drivers makes them slow down, makes them not jump a red light, use their mobile phone, that's got to improve driving standards and in return has got to improve public confidence in the system.
Do you know, it's very easy for the public to point the finger at a taxi driver, but there is no facility for the member of the public to point the finger at a person who is driving really badly. But then taxi drivers do choose to be taxi drivers.
Absolutely. And they are recognisable because their vehicles all signed up
All
with the
plated.
Kirklees logos, it's got the plates on, and we do a lot of publicity about letting people know if you've got a problem with a taxi driver or you need to report something, email us, ring us, and we will look into it and deal with it accordingly.
Now, this has caused a certain amount of controversy, but I understand the public support has been extraordinary. Would you like to tell us something about that?
The Examiner, as well as publishing their online edition and the hard copy newspaper, they also have a Facebook page where they publish their stories. And when they published this story last week that drivers were threatening to go on strike, the last time I looked a couple of days ago, it had attracted over 730 comments from the public, the vast majority in favour of what the council are doing. And stories on there from people about their own experiences. So there is a lot of support for it, and I think the drivers need to understand that. They are answerable, not just to Kirklees, but to the public at large.
Any comments to add here, Julie?
No, I think it's fantastic. I've been in so many scary situations with taxi drivers, and you just don't expect that. You don't expect people to get in a taxi and be driven at speed, jumping lights. That just is frightening. So anything we can do to clamp down on that and make it safer for the general public, I think should be welcomed.
It's not often that we can sit here and say council got it right, but on this occasion we can. As always, you can contact us on email at kirkleeslocaltv.com, and you can search for us on Twitter at Weekly Windup. Thank you to all our guests today. Thank you very much. See you next week.